It is just after 7 in the morning inside a compact family kitchen in Osaka, where breakfast is already waiting on the table. Steam rises from miso soup, grilled fish rests beside rice, and a teenage girl walks past everything toward the sink. She fills her mouth with plain tap water, tilts her head back, gargles for several seconds, then reaches for her school bag. Her mother wipes the counter, slips a folded mask into her coat pocket, and reminds her daughter to wash again at school. Nothing about this routine feels special to either of them, which may be the most interesting detail in the entire scene. In many Western homes, gargling usually begins after a sore throat appears, while masks often appear only after someone feels unwell. In Japan, however, several small precautions often begin earlier, sometimes before anyone has noticed the first sign of illness. That raises a simple question with a surprisingly complicated answer. Do these ordinary habits actually make any measurable difference? Long before the pandemic, masks were already common across Japanese trains, schools, shops, offices, and crowded neighborhood streets. Industry figures suggest Japan produced about 4.3 billion masks for personal use in 2018, showing how normal the habit had become. That number cannot reveal why each mask was worn, because illness, allergies, courtesy, and convenience often overlap in daily life. It does reveal that prevention was already woven into ordinary routines, rather than reserved only for obvious emergencies. Comparing cold rates between countries remains difficult because symptoms, sick leave, doctor visits, and reporting habits vary widely. So this story will not claim that Japan somehow defeated the common cold through a few simple cultural traditions. Instead, it will examine several Japanese habits that researchers have tested, separating useful evidence from attractive mythology. The first habit begins with nothing more impressive than a glass of water beside an ordinary kitchen sink. For decades, many doctors dismissed gargling as folk medicine because the idea appeared too simple to influence respiratory infections. Cold viruses were believed to enter cells quickly, leaving little reason to think brief rinsing could change anything important. Then researchers at Kyoto University decided to test the old advice under controlled conditions instead of continuing the argument. They recruited nearly 400 healthy adults and divided them into 3 groups during the winter cold season. One group gargled regularly with plain water, another used an iodine solution, and the third changed nothing about daily behavior. Researchers followed everyone for 60 days while recording symptoms including sore throats, runny noses, coughing, and fever. When the results arrived, the plain water group had experienced roughly 36% fewer colds than the group doing nothing. The difference was large enough to deserve attention, especially because the most sophisticated-looking option performed unexpectedly poorly. The iodine solution did not clearly outperform the control group, while ordinary water produced the strongest result in the trial. That reversal made the finding memorable because the simplest and cheapest choice had apparently done more than the medicated one. Scientists still cannot explain the effect with complete confidence, although several practical mechanisms have been proposed. Rinsing may remove some material, resting in the mouth and throat before it settles or interacts more deeply with tissue. Other explanations remain possible, which means the result is currently clearer than the biological mechanism behind it. The same trial also suggested that gargling might reduce symptom severity when a cold still managed to develop. A later observational study followed almost 20,000 Japanese children and found regular gargling was associated with fewer fevers. The pattern was stronger in some ages than others, while school absence changed little among the youngest children. Because researchers did not randomly assign every child, the study cannot prove that gargling alone caused those differences. Still, the result added another clue to a habit that Japanese families had practiced for generations. The historical twist is that official Japanese health guidance recommended gargling decades before modern researchers formally tested it. The advice came first, and the scientific evidence arrived much later, after countless families had already accepted the routine. Sometimes science introduces a completely new behavior, but sometimes it finally investigates something people have repeated for years. For anyone curious about trying it, the practical version remains simple. Use plain water, gargle gently, and avoid treating it as magic. The mask followed a similar path from emergency equipment to something ordinary enough to carry without much thought. Visitors often notice masks immediately in Japan, yet they may misunderstand what the visible fabric actually represents. A survey of Japanese adults during flu season found mask wearers also reported more hand washing, gargling, and crowd avoidance. Because the survey relied on self-reported behavior, it cannot prove the mask itself created better health outcomes. What it suggests is more interesting. One visible habit may signal several quieter precautions happening at the same time. The mask may therefore be only the surface of a wider pattern involving distance, cleanliness, timing, and consideration. Modern Japanese mask culture grew during public health campaigns surrounding the influenza pandemic of 1918. It became visible again during later outbreaks, when authorities encouraged masks inside crowded trains, theaters, and public spaces. Over time, the mask stopped looking like specialized emergency equipment and became part of familiar everyday behavior. One explanation connects this habit with a Japanese idea called mei wa ku o ka ke nye, meaning avoiding inconvenience for others. That idea changes the question from personal protection alone toward responsibility for classmates, coworkers, relatives, and strangers nearby. A person wearing a mask while unwell may be signaling care rather than fear, panic, or social withdrawal. Then spring arrives bringing pollen, and many of the same masks return for an entirely different reason. For people with seasonal allergies, the mask may have little connection with infection and everything to do with breathing comfortably. Because the object already serves several purposes, wearing one does not always attract the same attention it might elsewhere. The useful lesson is not that everyone must wear masks constantly, but that timing and context matter. Covering a cough, creating distance when sick, or using a mask in crowded spaces are modest forms of consideration. Behind the mask sits another habit with much clearer evidence and much less cultural mystery: proper hand washing. At a school sink after lunch, children line up, roll up their sleeves, and scrub while teachers watch nearby. A major Cochrane review combined 16 trials and found that hand hygiene lowered respiratory illness risk by about 11% overall. An earlier review found reductions ranging from roughly 6 to 44%, depending on the setting and washing habits. The wide range makes sense because quickly wetting fingertips is very different from washing carefully with soap for long enough. In Japan, the more interesting question is not whether children hear instructions about washing their hands. Children hear that advice almost everywhere, but repetition determines whether the behavior becomes automatic or remains optional. Many Japanese elementary schools build hand washing and gargling into the daily rhythm instead of waiting for an outbreak. Some schools also conduct hygiene checks called Aisai Kensa, looking at tissues, handkerchiefs, fingernails, and basic cleanliness. To adults, these details may seem overly strict, yet to children, they quickly become part of normal school life. There may also be an older cultural echo behind this emphasis on washing before entering shared or meaningful spaces. Visitors to Shinto shrines have washed their hands and rinsed their mouths before prayer for many generations. One study found adults who remembered frequent childhood shrine washing were more likely to report regular soap use later. That link does not prove one habit caused the other, because researchers relied on adults remembering their own childhood experiences. Even so, the pattern suggests ritual cleanliness may have quietly reinforced practical hygiene across many years. Japanese schools often add another routine called OSOHG. When students spend time cleaning their own classrooms, they wipe desks, sweep floors, organize shared spaces, and learn that cleanliness is not always another person's responsibility. No cited study proves this cleaning routine alone reduces respiratory infections, so the custom should not be treated as medical prevention. Its deeper value may be behavioral, because repeated responsibility can make care for shared environments feel completely ordinary. By adulthood, these routines may no longer resemble health advice, lectures, warnings, or temporary seasonal campaigns. They feel closer to tying shoes, brushing hair, or placing belongings where they belong each evening. The easiest way to apply this lesson is to wash properly, repeat it consistently, and attach it to a familiar daily moment. The same pattern appears again in a completely different area of Japanese life: ordinary daily movement. Imagine a weekday commute through Tokyo, Osaka, or Yokohama before the offices and shops fully open. A person walks to the station, climbs stairs, crosses platforms, changes trains, and continues several blocks toward work. There is no gym bag, no dramatic workout plan, and no promise of transformation within 30 days. The movement happens because transportation requires it, which may make the habit easier to continue for decades. In 2017, Stanford researchers examined smartphone activity from more than 700,000 people across 111 countries. Every phone recorded movement in the same basic way, making the international comparison more consistent than many older studies. Picture a crowded station at rush hour, where even an ordinary commute can involve stairs, platforms, and several long corridors. Japan appeared among the more active countries, while American users recorded noticeably fewer daily steps on average. The app users did not represent every citizen, but the pattern matches daily life in many Japanese cities. Moderate walking temporarily changes the number and movement of several immune cells circulating through the bloodstream. Among them are natural killer cells, which help identify and destroy cells already infected by viruses. This does not mean immune cells simply accumulate with every walk, because the body's response remains far more complicated. The stronger evidence comes from practical trials comparing regularly active people with less active control groups. In one older trial, elderly women walked briskly for 40 minutes, 5 days each week. They developed respiratory infections at less than half the rate observed in a sedentary comparison group. Another study involving postmenopausal women found regular moderate exercise was followed by noticeably fewer reported colds. These trials were not perfect, but together they support a practical idea rather than a miraculous promise. Regular moderate movement may support health, while extreme exercise combined with poor sleep can create additional physical stress. Scientists still debate exactly how intense training changes infection risk, so simple slogans remain misleading. The strongest advantage of ordinary walking may be that it continues without demanding constant motivation or special equipment. Walking to a station does not require a membership, while climbing stairs rarely feels like a scheduled workout. A more realistic starting point may be 10 extra minutes on foot, especially when the walk becomes part of an existing journey. The final habit waits quietly on the breakfast table, hidden inside familiar smells, textures, and small side dishes. A spoonful of natto, a bowl of miso soup, or fermented vegetables all begin with microbial activity. That does not mean every fermented food still contains large numbers of living bacteria when someone finally eats it. Heating, pasteurization, storage, and modern processing can reduce living microbes, especially in very hot miso soup. Natto remains especially interesting because the bacterium behind its smell and stickiness can form spores that survive harsh conditions better than many bacteria. That unusual biology does not make natto magical, but it gives researchers a clear reason to study it. Stanford researchers explored the wider question through a 10-week trial involving 2 different dietary approaches. One group increased fermented foods such as yogurt, kefir, kimchi, and fermented vegetables, while another increased fiber. The fermented food group showed greater gut microbe diversity and reductions across 19 blood markers connected with inflammation. The fiber group did not show the same pattern during that particular 10-week period, surprising the research team. However, the study did not prove fermented food is generally better than fiber in every diet or situation. It simply showed that the 2 diets produced different biological effects during this particular 10-week trial. A much smaller Japanese study asked 8 healthy volunteers to eat miso soup containing natto for 2 weeks. Researchers observed increases in some beneficial bacteria and decreases in another species associated with food spoilage. With only 8 participants, the result remains an early clue rather than a reliable final conclusion. Even so, it points in the same broad direction as the larger Stanford study on fermented foods. The gut microbiome interacts with the immune system and helps shape signals connected with inflammation and defense. A diverse microbiome does not guarantee fewer winter colds, and no single food can provide that promise. The useful idea is simpler. Food affects the body through more than calories, protein, fat, and vitamins. The benefit also does not depend on eating something specifically Japanese, because many cultures preserve foods through fermentation. Yogurt, kefir, kimchi, sauerkraut, and other fermented foods may offer similar possibilities when prepared and stored appropriately. At the table, the simplest experiment is choosing one fermented food you already enjoy and eating it regularly without expecting miracles. After examining all 5 habits, there is still no single Japanese secret that can explain who catches a cold. The stronger pattern is timing and repetition, with prevention beginning at the sink, at school, on station platforms, and around breakfast tables. Other influences still matter, especially sleep, crowded commutes, and access to healthcare, so these routines should never be treated as complete protection. A glass of water, properly washed hands, a little more walking, or one fermented food can still be realistic starting points. The best choice is not the most impressive habit, but the one that fits naturally enough to repeat without constant effort. Which of these small routines would be easiest for you to begin this week and still repeat next month?